Mental illness, also called mental health disorders, refers to a wide range of mental health conditions disorders that affect your mood, thinking and behavior. From urges to eat grass. 2. Growth sensations. Here are 10 mental disorders you may not know existed. Number 10. Obsessive-compulsive disorder or OCD. Obsessive-compulsive disorder is an anxiety disorder that makes the victim have repeated and unwanted thoughts, urges, or sensation, which is why it is called obsessive. These obsessions make people want to do something over and over again, which leads to the compulsion part of the name. People with OCD often have persistent and unwanted thoughts on routines and behaviors that are time-consuming. If these routines and behaviors are not completed, that victim can become greatly distressed. Some persons know their obsessions are fake while some are in denial. Even those who know their obsession is fake still have a hard time getting their mind off of the obsession and stopping the compulsive actions. A diagnosis of OCD requires the presence of obsession and/or compulsions that are time-consuming, more than 1 hour a day, cause major distress, and impair work, social or other important function. About 1.2% of Americans have OCD, and among adults slightly more women than men are affected. OCD often begins in childhood, adolescence, or early adulthood. The average age symptoms appear is 19 years old. Some obsession includes 1. Cleaning thoughts. 2. Forbidden sexual thoughts. 3. Religious thoughts. Some compulsion includes 1. Cleaning to reduce the fear that germs, dirt, or chemicals will contaminate them. Some spend many hours washing themselves or cleaning their surroundings. 2. Repeating to dispel anxiety. Some people utter a name or phrase or repeat a behavior several times. They know these repetitions won't actually guard against injury, but fear harm will occur if the repetitions aren't done. 3. Checking to reduce the fear of harming oneself or others by, for example, forgetting to lock the door or turn off the gas stove. Some people develop checking rituals. Some people repeatedly retrace driving routes to be sure they haven't hit anyone. 4. Ordering and arranging to reduce discomfort. Some people like to put objects, such as books, in a certain order, or arrange household items just so, or in a symmetric fashion. 5. Mental compulsions to response to intrusive obsessive thoughts. Some people silently pray or say phrases to reduce anxiety or prevent a dreaded future event. Number 9. Stendhal syndrome. The origin. In 1817, Henri-Marie Bell, a famous and prestigious French writer, was touring Italy. He was looking for information for his next book. He was also known as Stendhal. During his visit to Florence, he toured every corner of the city. He was amazed by the art that filled every inch of the streets. He saw museums, churches, domes, landscapes, roofs, facades, and frescoes. Bell wanted to take it all in. When he visited the Basilica of the Holy Cross, his curiosity, excitement, and enthusiasm unleashed a series of physical symptoms. He started to sweat and feel a deep sense of anguish. His heart rate sped up and he began to feel vertigo, which is a loss of balance. He had to sit down so he could calm down and reflect on what had happened. Stendhal syndrome symptoms. It wasn't until a century later when people started to consider it a syndrome. In 1979, Italian psychiatrist Graziella Magarini investigated and studied 100 similar cases of tourists in Florence. He observed that he could summarize the set of symptoms as a beautiful metaphor, a kind of artistic embarrassment. Stendhal syndrome symptomatology includes tachycardia, sweating, palpitations, hot flashes, terror, emotional tension, and exhaustion. In more serious cases, it can cause dizziness that can result in fainting or even depression. Number 8. Factitious disorder. Factitious disorder is a mental disorder in which a person acts as if he or she has a physical or mental illness. Factitious disorders are of two types. 1. Factitious disorder imposed on self includes the falsifying of psychological or physical signs or symptoms. An example of a psychological factitious disorder is mimicking behavior that is typical of a mental illness, such as schizophrenia. The person may appear confused, make absurd statements, and report hallucinations, the experience of sensing things that are not there, for example, hearing voices. 2. Factitious disorder imposed on another. People with this disorder produce or fabricate symptoms of illness in others under their care, children, elderly adults, disabled persons, or pets. It most often occurs in mothers, although it can occur in fathers, who intentionally harm their children in order to receive attention. The diagnosis is not given to the victim, but rather to the perpetrator. People with factitious disorder may lie about or mimic symptoms, hurt themselves to bring on symptoms, alter diagnostic tests, such as contaminating a urine sample or tampering with a wound to prevent healing. Be willing to undergo painful or risky tests and operations in order to obtain the sympathy and special attention given to people who are truly medically ill. Number 7. Kluver-Bucy syndrome. Kluver-Bucy syndrome is a rare behavioral impairment characterized by inappropriate sexual behaviors and mouthing of objects. The list of symptoms differs somewhat by source. Generally included are the following: amnesia, characterized by an inability to recall memories. Its nature is both anterograde and retrograde, meaning new memories cannot be formed and old memories cannot be recalled. The level of amnesia is considered to be profound. Docility, characterized by exhibiting diminished fear responses or reacting with unusually low aggression. This has also been termed placidity or tameness. Dietary changes and hyperphagia, characterized by eating inappropriate objects, pica, or overeating, or both. Hyperorality, described by as an oral tendency, or compulsion to examine objects by mouth. Hypersexuality, characterized by a heightened libido or a tendency to seek sexual stimulation from unusual or inappropriate objects. Visual agnosia, characterized by an inability to recognize familiar objects or people. Number 6. Cotard delusion. Cotard delusion is a rare condition marked by the false belief that you or your body parts are dead, dying, or don't exist. One of the main symptoms of Cotard delusion is nihilism. Nihilism is the belief that nothing has any value or meaning. It can also include the belief that nothing really exists. People with Cotard delusion feel as if they're dead or rotting away. In some cases, they might feel like they've never existed. While some people feel this way about their entire body, others only feel it in regard to specific organs, limbs, or even their soul. Other symptoms include anxiety, hallucinations, hypochondria, guilt, preoccupation with hurting yourself or death. Several studies indicate that the average age of people with Cotard delusion is about 50. It can also occur in children and teenagers. People under the age of 25 with Cotard delusion tend to also have bipolar depression. Women also seem to be more likely to develop Cotard delusion. Number 5. Clinical lycanthropy. Clinical lycanthropy is defined as a rare psychiatric syndrome that involves a delusion that the affected person can transform into, has transformed into, or is, an animal. It has been associated with the altered states of mind that accompany psychosis, the mental state that typically involves delusions and hallucinations, with the transformation only seeming to happen in the mind and behavior of the affected person. A study on lycanthropy from the McLean Hospital reported on a series of cases and proposed some diagnostic criteria by which lycanthropy could be recognized. A patient reports in a moment of lucidity or reminiscence that they sometimes feel as an animal or have felt like one. A patient behaves in a manner that resembles animal behavior, for example howling, growling, or crawling. Number 4. Alice in Wonderland. Alice in Wonderland syndrome, AWS, is a rare condition that causes temporary episodes of distorted perception and disorientation. You may feel larger or smaller than you actually are. These episodes aren't the result of a problem with your eyes or a hallucination. They're caused by changes in how your brain perceives the environment you're in and how your body looks. This syndrome can affect multiple senses, including vision, touch, and hearing. You may also lose a sense of time. Time may seem to pass faster or slower than you think. AWS primarily affects children and young adults. Most people grow out the disordered perceptions as they age, but it's still possible to experience this in adulthood. AWS is also known as Todd syndrome. That's because it was first identified in the 1950s by Dr. John Todd, a British psychiatrist. He noted that the symptoms and recorded anecdotes of the syndrome closely resembled episodes that the character Alice Liddell experienced in Lewis Carroll's novel Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Number 3. Boanthropy. Boanthropy is a psychological disorder in which a human believes himself or herself to be a bovine, which is an animal of the cattle group. What is it? Boanthropy is a psychological disorder where a person believes that he or she is a cow. Where did it originate? The most famous case of boanthropy occurred in King Nebuchadnezzar, who in the book of Daniel, was said to have turned into a cow. What are the symptoms? Sufferers of this disorder begin by becoming vegetarians. Soon after they start mooing uncontrollably and acquire a strange taste for grass. Finally, they wake up in a field somewhere, unable to do anything but Joe. The disorder usually begins as a sort of dream, and then takes over a person entirely, eventually becoming a mania. It is also possible that this state can be caused by hypnosis, provided that a person is susceptible to it. Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, is also thought of suffering from this disease, being one of the people kind and ate grass like an ox, as stated in the book of Daniel. Number 2. Alien hand syndrome. Alien hand syndrome is a rare neurological condition that causes one hand to act on its own free will. Sometimes one leg is affected, though this isn't as common. With alien hand syndrome, the hand isn't under the control of the mind and moves as though it has its own mind. The affected hand feels foreign to its owner during these episodes and seems to move deliberately to carry out tasks that are unintentional. While it can affect children, usually alien hand occurs in adults. It's sometimes referred to as Dr. Strangelove syndrome, Strangelovian hand, or anarchic hand. The most prominent symptom of alien hand syndrome is the inability to control the hand as it acts independently. The affected hand may move involuntarily and perform goal-directed tasks and actions. The hand is said to move without cognitive control or awareness. It's as though it's being controlled by someone else or has a mind of its own. Number 1. Apotemnophilia. The syndrome of apotemnophilia, body integrity or amputee identity disorder, is defined as the desire for amputation of a healthy limb, and may be accompanied by behavior of pretending to be an amputee and sometimes, but not necessarily, by sexual arousal. A case history is presented of a 35-year-old man who was referred because of his desire for amputation of his left leg, without sexual connotations. The course of a combined cognitive behavioral psychotherapy with SSRI treatment is described. Symptoms showed considerable similarity with obsessive-compulsive disorder, and some similarity with body dysmorphic disorder according to DSM-4, but the core symptoms seem to be strongly connected with a sense of identity. Treatment with a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor decreased levels of distress only. The effects of cognitive restructuring of the psychotherapy were limited, whereas the behavioral elements substantially reduced the behavior of pretending to be an amputee. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe.